Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 48 Now. I'm digital host AJ Wiest, and Burritt on the Mountain is hosting a Black History Month event this Saturday from 10 to 4 titled Rosenwald Schools, Black Workers, and the Making of America. And of course, today I am joined with Education Manager Shauna Hyde. Shauna, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.
First, can you talk a little bit about what inspired this event here in the Huntsville community?
Well, here at Burritt on the Mountain, we are, of course, a museum. We were actually the first museum created in Huntsville 70 years ago. We're actually really proud of that and celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. It was about 8-9 years ago, we decided that we would like to add a schoolhouse to our museum. And so we commissioned and had built a replica of what's called a Rosenwald Schoolhouse. Rosenwald schoolhouses were built between 1912 and 1932 throughout the United States, from Maryland down through Texas, the southern part of the United States. They were built as a partnership with Julius Rosenwald, who was a philanthropist that worked with Sears and Roebuck, and Booker T. Washington, who was the president of Tuskegee University. And they partnership together because there was a real need, especially at that time, for schools in the South to educate African-American children. And so that's what they did. They created this partnership. They built over 5,300 of these schools throughout the South in that 20-year period. And we decided to put up a replica, and we do have one here on our site. We actually conduct field trips in it, where we actually do a day of school in 1918. And we also talk about the history and how important these schools were to educating a lot of people in the South. So we have the building, we do field trips, we do different programs. So as we were thinking about what we could do to help celebrate Black History Month this year, we decided to use our schoolhouse and to celebrate the Black workers, and especially those who were educated during this time in these schoolhouses. Of course, the schoolhouses continue to remain through the 1950s, 60s. There aren't any more that are used as schoolhouses today, but there are several that are still in operation, used as community centers and things like that. We couldn't find one to move here, so we actually built one that's a replica. And so on Saturday, we are going to be honoring the Black History Month by talking about and giving demonstrations in our schoolhouse. On that day, we're going to have two different times, one at 10:30 and one at 2 o'clock, where we're actually going to have a teacher in our classrooms. We're going to talk about the history of the schoolhouse. You're going to learn a little bit about the pledge that was said during 1918, because it's a little different than the pledge we use today, and the history of the pledge. And we're also going to let kids, or any adult, anybody who's here, they're going to learn to write with what's called nib pens, pen and ink, because in 1918, they would have used pen and ink to write.
Very, very cool. Sounds like it is going to be a very eventful day, but a lot of learning. And I understand on Saturday's events, you can watch demonstrations of a lot of different things, such as blacksmithing, basket weaving, woodworking. Can you talk a bit about those?
Yes. So one of the philosophies of Booker T, as he created all of these schools in the South, was not only were children going to be able to come to school and learn how to do read, write, and do math, it was also an industrial school. And so when students came, part of their education was also learning skills, so that by the time they graduated from the 8th grade, which most of the schools went to 8th grade, but there were several that were high schools that you could go on if you would like to, you could learn some kind of a skill that you could take and help use to make a living for your family. Things like blacksmithing, tinsmithing, woodworking, how to fix a small engine. Girls would learn skills about homemaking, mostly canning, sewing, maybe even use a treadle sewing machine, or hopefully an electric one as things progressed. They also might learn childcare, things like that. And so we are also going to be celebrating the Black workers that helped build our country. especially during this time. So we will have a blacksmithing demonstration throughout the day. We will have a woodworking demonstration throughout the day. We have a dressmaker that's going to talk a little bit about dressmaking. And we're going to have a potter in our pottery studio that's up here. And so you can come through the day, throughout the day, through those times, throughout the whole day, and watch some of those artisans and ask any questions and learn about the skills that they would have learned. Also at 12:30, we're going to do a specific tour through the museum. We're going to start in our mansion because the mansion has a really good exhibit now from Auburn University that is going to talk about specifically the Rosenwald schools that were built in Alabama. And then you're going to come through and learn specifically some of the stories of several successful people that went through Rosenwald Schools. Anyway, all of our stories are going to be success stories about people that used their education to better themselves and to make our communities wonderful.
That is incredible, and it sounds like a very immersive museum. There's a lot of different things you can do, and it sounds like a great time. But what is one of the things at the museum, maybe it's one of the exhibits that you find particularly fascinating?
Ooh, you want me to pick a favorite?
Or just one that you just find super fascinating. It doesn't have to be a favorite.
One I mentioned about the Auburn University, it's an exhibit we have on loan right now when we only have till May. Highly recommend it. I actually saw it when it was down in Montgomery and was instrumental in trying to bring it up here so that people in North Alabama could see it, because it's a super good success story about how these schools were built throughout Alabama to help educate African-American children. But the nice thing about our museum is we have 6 houses and a church that were all houses that were moved up here. They were all built either in North Alabama or Southern Tennessee back in the 1800s. All of the stories, all of the houses have a story associated with them, with the people that lived in them back in the 1800s. So again, it's hard for me to just pick one thing, but there are several things that you can come up and see and learn a lot more about the history of Alabama 200 years ago up to today. And of course, Dr. Burritt's mansion itself is a jewel, and you can also learn about him and his vision. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't even have this place to be today.
That's right, absolutely. And earlier you mentioned Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington. Just talk about those two characters and the lasting legacy that they made.
They were amazing. I don't know how much history you want, but Julius, he was the son of a Jewish immigrant, lived in New York City. His dad was a tailor. And one day he was in his shop working, and a man named Robert Sears walked into the store. This man Robert was known for being a salesman and promising things. And he had promised someone 100 suits for $20 each. And he walked in to the Rosenwald tailor shop and asked if he could do that. Well, he did, and they struck up a really good friendship, and Julius became friends with Robert, and Robert Sears is the man who started Sears and Roebuck Company, and Julius was in the ground level of that company. And because of that, he became quite a philanthropist. He loved giving back to the community. He had actually read Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery, that talked about how he was born into slavery and freed at 5, and what he did to be able to get an education for himself. And he started donating to the Tuskegee Institution, and that's how they became very good friends. And it just happened one day, they were at a fundraiser, and Julius just turned to him and said, kind of off the cuff, I really wish there was something more I could do to help with educating the African-American children in our country. And Booker T just jumped on it. Of course, Booker T. Washington himself, like I said, was born into slavery. He was living in West Virginia. His father wanted him to work in the mines. That wasn't what Julius wanted to do. He actually went to the mine owner's wife. She taught him how to be a butler in her home and paid him. He used that money to go to Hampton, Virginia, and get himself an education. Once he did, he came back to West Virginia, was there just a short time before somebody called him and said, hey, we want you to go down to Alabama and start a school in this town called Tuskegee. We have some land. We even have a building. Please go there. Well, Booker T came, And when he got down to Tuskegee, there was a chicken coop. And so he, through his own diligence, got to work and was able to raise money through a lot of lectures and selling his book as he started. And then he started a school down there. And today, his great legacy went from one small school to the University of Tuskegee today. But when the two of them got together, they became good friends. And of course, they started this legacy. Julius put up the money, usually about 25% of the money for each school was put up by the Rosenwald Foundation. The communities themselves raised money. They actually put in the hard work to build the schools. Booker T went back to Tuskegee. He had his students design the buildings. And so most of the buildings were designed in a 1, 2, 3, or 4 room schoolhouse typical, and they used those designs throughout the South as they built all of these buildings. What's interesting is Booker T did die shortly after they got started. I believe he died in 1915, if I'm remembering right. And Julius continued the legacy all the way up until he died in 1932. And that's, it's just a testament to their friendship and a testament to their dedication and making sure that this was such a success story.
Absolutely. Very well said. Shauna, how important would you say events such as this one this Saturday that are filled with history is for our community here in Huntsville?
Well, you're talking to a museum educator. So to me, history is one of the most important things, partly because we learn from things that happened in history. And it's really super important for us to remember our history. When we remember our history and remember how when things get hard, when we're in our lives, we look back on history and you can look at people like Booker T. Washington. You can look at people like our first president, George Washington. They suffered and had real hardships. I can't imagine what Booker T would have thought when he got to Tuskegee and all that was there was a chicken coop. So he put his hand, rolled up his sleeves and said, this is what I'm going to do. And I think those are just awesome examples to us that when we have hard things, we overcome them and we can create wonderful legacies for the rest of the world.
Very, very well said. Well, Shauna, that's all the questions I have for you, but if maybe I didn't ask something you would like to further add, please feel free. But once again, thank you so much for joining in with me today.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you, AJ, taking the time to learn about what we're doing up here. We're really excited about our day on Saturday. It begins at 10. It goes through 4 o'clock. Like I said, we've got something at 10:30 and then 2:30. And then at 12:30, we're going to be doing our tour. Please come up and take a visit of the mountain. And of course, one of the things that we're super proud of here at Burritt on the Mountain is we have the best view of Huntsville. Sounds like Saturday is going to be a beautiful day. It almost might even hit 80 degrees. So come on out and enjoy learning a little bit about our history here in Alabama and enjoy your day. Just make sure you bring a picnic lunch. We do not have a restaurant up here at Burritt on the Mountain.
That is good to know, but yes, definitely excited about the weather this weekend. If you're watching, come on out to Burritt on the Mountain from 10 to 4 this weekend and learn about the history. Shauna, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome, AJ. Hope you have a great day.